Alright, again, 11.6 is solving all polynomial equations, and you are finding all solutions of x to the fourth plus 10x cubed plus 25x squared is equal to 0. So, we are factoring that out. So what did we get when we factored? Mickey, how can we factor this?
And what they have in common, which is x squared.
Okay, so they're pulling out an x squared.
And then you have x squared plus 10x plus 25.
Alright, equals 0. So the next step is to look at this and see if this can be factored again. Can this part be factored out again?
No.
Is this, you can do two things. Square root it is right. So let's see if I square rooted it, if I would get two things. If I square root it, what do I have? The square root of x is x. Square root of 25 is 5. And then I have the same sign. So, if I factor this out, if I distribute x times x is x squared, inner is 5x, outer is 5x, 5x plus 5x is 10x, and 5 and 5 is 25. So I know that that is right. So that means I have x squared, and these are the same, so I have x plus 5 squared is equal to 0. Finding all solutions. We've done this before. What do I have to do next? What's my next thing I have to do? Yes. We are finding the zeros. How do I find the zeros?
You figure out what plus 5 equals 0.
So yeah, so I'm going here and I'm taking and setting this to 0, and then I'm setting this to 0. Alright, so when I set this to 0 and I set this to 0, I'm looking for what's going to be 0. So my next step after you factor is you set both things to 0, and then you solve them out. So how do I solve for x here? Take the square root. X equals 0. X plus 5 squared equals 0. I'd have to take the square root. So I have here x plus 5 is equal to 0. Subtract my 5. So I have x is equal to a negative 5. Looking back up here, let's look for a few things. What was my degree of my polynomial? 4. Remember to always look to see if 4, 3, 2, it's in order, so that's 4 is it. But on your tests and quizzes, they're not always going to put the highest number first, so always look. Yesterday's it wasn't in order, so if you just put whatever was in front, that wasn't right. But now we know degree is 4 because that's the highest degree or highest exponent. How many zeros does this polynomial have? 4. It has 4. It has exact the same thing. Now the question is, right now we only found 2. Are any of these double? Both of them, because this one's squared, so that's a double. And this one was squared, so this is a double. So now my next question, the only thing new in this section is how many real zeros do we have? We have all 4 of them are real zeros because we found all 4 and none of them are imaginary. The next one we're actually going to find will be imaginary. So we have 0 is doubled, negative 5 is doubled. What does a 4th degree polynomial look like? Derek, what does a 4th degree polynomial look like? Your choices are a parabola or a snake. Cubes will look like snakes. Evens, odds are snakes. Evens are parabolas. So we know it's going to look like this. Is it going to open up or down? Up. It's going to open up. We have a 0 at 0, and we have a 0 at -5. At -5, what happens, Brett, since this is a double, what happens when it's a double? It bounces, is right. So it bounces at my -5, and what happens at 0, Billy? 0 was a double, so it also bounces. So it's going to come up and it's going to bounce again. So that's what the graph looks like. Well, let's see if we're right. So I'm going to put in x to the 4th plus 10x cubed plus 25x squared, and I'm going to graph it. Now we can clearly see that it bounces here. We can't see this height, and we haven't learned anything to tell us how high this is, so I could keep extending it up on my window, and I'll go to, I'll even go, oops, not that one. I'll go to my max of 100, and I don't even know if you'll see anything then. We can clearly see it bounces. Oh, there it is. So we can see it if I go up to 100. So that is what it looks like. All right. Example 2. Alright, so we have here, find all zeros to x cubed minus 1. So we have x cubed minus 1. We are going to factor by using x cubed minus b cubed is equal to a minus b. This is the formula that you've been using. A squared plus ab plus b squared. So I want you to take a moment, and I want you to try to factor that. And then I'm gonna walk one of you guys through it. Maybe you need to write something to stay awake. Alright, so Alex, what does this tell me to do then? How did I get from a cubed to a?
By multiplying it by the a squared. The a squared.
So you're going to take the cube root of here. So what is the cube root of x cubed? X. And then you take the cube root of the last number. So the cube root of 1 is 1. And the same sign as here. Then what does it tell me to do now? It says to, what is that?
Squared.
So square a. So I'm going to square the position that's here. So what am I going to square?
A.
Which is
X.
x. So I have x squared. Then it says to change the sign. So if it was negative, it's positive. So now it's going to be positive. And then what does it say to do here?
Multiply A and B.
So we have what number?
X and -1.
So we have x because we're going to keep it because it said change the sign. So we're going to have x. and then it says to square the last, so we have one,
B,
which is
can't tell what the
It's
actual one is.
1, so 1 squared, so it's 1. Alright, so, and that equals, and we're finding all zeros, so we're setting that equal to 0. Right? So, at this point, we need to figure out, can I factor this more? AC, what does AC equal? AC equals 1. Is there two numbers that when I multiply them together gives me 1, when I add them gives me 1? So is there any number that when I multiply them together gives me 1, but when I add them it gives me 1? No. So this can't be this cannot be factored anymore. So after I factored it, what's my next step? Set each one to 0. So x minus 1 equals 0, and x squared plus x plus 1 equals 0. Hopefully you all agree that this one's easy to solve for. So this one is 1, because I added 1, so x equals 1. See if anybody in this hour remembers. If you have a square and you are solving for x, what formula can we use to solve for x? What does anybody know what another name for a square could be? What kind of formula or what kind of equation? Starts with Q. Quadratic. Quadratic. So, quadratic says negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So, let's find out what was a. Remember, these are when you're using the quadratic, do you use the variables? No, you use the coefficients. So a is 1, b is 1, and c is 1. So we have negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared, which is 1, minus 4 times 1 times 1, so it's minus 4, all over 2. So, what we know is we have negative 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 3 over 2. All I did was 1 minus 4. So, what happens if I take the square root of a negative number? You get the I. So if right here, this is I, so this one right here is negative 1 plus square root of 3i over 2, and the other one is negative 1 plus, or minus, minus the square root of 3i over 2. So here's a 0, that's a 0, and this is a 0. So, looking back up here, how many zeros, first of all, what was the degree of this polynomial? How many zeros were we looking for? How many zeros are real? 1 real. A real is going to be an x-intercept. Imaginary makes curves in the graph. Alright? So we know that this one has how many x-intercepts is 1. And the x-intercept is at 1. So here's this. It's x cubed, so is this a parabola or a snake? Snake. And because it's positive, it starts here and it goes like this and it goes through and snakes through. So that's what your graph will look like. Let's see if we're right. the square root of -3. So, turn my calculator on. Clear that out. We have x cubed minus 1. And I'm going to graph it. I'm going to zoom standard. So hopefully you can see that it clearly hit at 1, and so it comes, and so these, the curves, is what's made by the imaginary. Alright. Questions? Anybody not have this? Alright, take out yesterday's homework.